Hello, welcome back to Perspectiva. Now, India's Gen Z is emerging as a powerful political voice with thousands of young people taking to the streets in what has become one of the most significant youth-led protest movements during Prime Minister Modi's time in office. What began as anger over the alleged leak of a national medical entrance examination has grown into a broader expression of frustration over youth unemployment, accountability and opportunities for young Indians. Now, protesters say the issue goes far beyond one examination. For many, it reflects deeper concerns about fairness, transparency and the future facing millions of students. Well, scenes from New Delhi have drawn national and international attention. Videos shared widely on social media show students confronting riot police with footage of protesters being detained, beaten with batons and dispersed with tear gas. Now, those images have fueled public debate and intensified scrutiny of the government's handling. Political analysts say the protests are particularly significant because many participants come from India's urban middle class, a demographic that has traditionally been regarded as a strong support base for Prime Minister Modi and the BJP. Opposition leaders have joined the demonstrations, accusing the government of ignoring the concerns of young people and responding to dissent with force instead of dialogue. Well, several opposition politicians, such as Rahul Gandhi, were actually briefly detained while protesting in solidarity with the students, further raising the political temperature. The Modi government has responded and defended its response, saying it acted swiftly after the examination controversy by cancelling the affected test and promising reforms to strengthen the examination system. Now, government leaders also argue that some demonstrations have been influenced by political groups seeking to expand the protest beyond the original issue. But many observers believe the movement reflects broader frustrations that many have been building up with the young Indians. Rising competition for education, employment concerns over economic opportunities and the growing pressure on students have combined to create an increasing willingness to challenge authority. Some analysts compare the current mobilisation with recent youth-led movements in neighbouring countries like Bangladesh and Nepal, where Gen Z played an important role in reshaping national politics. Now, whether India's movement develops in the same direction still remains uncertain, but it has already highlighted the growing political influence in the country's youngest generation. For now, India's Gen Z has sent a clear message. Young people expect accountability, transparency and equal opportunity, and they want their voices heard. The question now is whether the government responds through dialogue and reform, or whether this wave of youth activism continues to gain momentum in the months ahead. To examine the growing Gen Z protest movement in India, its political implications and the challenges it presents for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government, we're joined by Dr. Habib Siddiqui, an analyst on Indian politics. Mr. Siddiqui, hello and welcome to Perspectiva. What makes these Gen Z protests different from the other student movements in India, and why have they attracted so much national attention?
Well, they are different because of the fact that here we are talking about a new generation of protesters that are what we call our Gen Z generation. In a seminal paper that Dr. Modudur Rahman from Boston and I wrote back in 2024, right after the youth-led revolution inside Bangladesh that was able to topple an autocratic regime out there, is the fact that these youths, they are what we call that are, leading this kind of revolutions. They are what we call our modernist thinkers. Okay, so for them, it is entirely different outlook about the world that they live in. They think themselves as the children of the time that have been somewhat abandoned by the previous generations. Previous generations were more into for themselves rather than thinking about the future. So they think that they have to own it, run it, direct it so that they could survive. Okay. So, and here in India, so these youth movement belong to this meta-modernist philosophy. They are digitally native, they are politically aware, and they are far less impatient with the institutional failure. And here we are talking about a massive failure in India. Just imagine that in the last 10 years or so, there were about 152 exam leaks. Okay. These guys took the exam in May, and they found out the exam questions were already leaked. And who gets those leaked questions? Probably somebody there affiliated with the very institutions that were supposed to guard them. So there is a corruption, there is a serious systemic problem that they are complaining about. And remember, for this national exam we are talking about for the medical school, NEET, about 2 million people compete for about 130,000 seats. So this is a huge thing, right? So 130,000 out of 2 million. So you are talking about 6.5%, right? So that's a very small number that gets to pass those exams. So it's not a small thing. Why it has been able to attract national attention? First of all, these students that took the exam, they come from the urban middle class, which have been a core group of BJP. So BJP has relied on them, and many of for BJP because they consider BJP as a party that cares about economy, about education, all the false promises, if you can call it that way, by Narendra Modi and his party, right? And they feel cheated, betrayed right now. And they're capturing about how they feel. First of all, they were mocked as cockroaches, right? And then they show, like when they have gathered for a peaceful demonstration, how they're beaten up by the police. Okay. And these are captured, shared online on a real-time kind of way. And so this is really, has become something which is national right now. People are paying attention. They are saying like, okay, what is going on? So this is definitely, a unique time in Indian history because these guys, they are not affiliated with any kind of ideology per se, although yes, they voted for BJP and they do form the core group within BJP for support of this particular party to come to power. But they're not tied up ideologically to anything, right? So, and they're authentic about what they are talking about. So that has definitely, captured the national attention in a big, big way.
Well, the protests began over the alleged medical entrance exam paper leak, but they now appear to reflect wider concerns. Have they evolved into a broader expression of young frustration over governance, unemployment, and accountability?
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. So remember that there are, the way I look at it, there are three drivers for the wider frustration felt by the student community. First of all is the youth unemployment. If you look at India, right, it is right now probably the fourth or the fifth largest economy in the world, okay, surpassing, a lot of other countries, okay, and it's supposed to become the third by the end of this decade. And we're talking about the $4 trillion economy, right? Okay. So when an economy is this big, then the people say, okay, what we are getting at the end of this thing, right? They see that, okay, their GDP is even lower than Bangladesh, right? Okay, it's about $2,800, while Bangladesh is about $2,900, right? So this is lower than Bangladesh. And then about 40% of the graduates over the age of 25 are unemployed. And then you look at, there are close to 300 billionaires in India. Every year, there are few more dozens, that are adding up to this billionaire list. Passing this exam, that way they could become, like a medical practitioner, makes a big difference in terms of their social mobility going upward, right? And they spend tons of money. The families are spending money, they are being coached, they are going through all this, expenses related to taking the test, preparation, and all those things. And this particular test is right now botched. okay? So they're supposed to trust an institution that, look, here is an exam that we could take, and we believe that those who qualify on the basis of merit, they will be able to get in. Now, these are all being challenged. So this is a big, big problem, right? And they're also showing the world that, look, we expected in a democratic country our right of freedom of expression, of gathering, of protesting, and we are being beaten mercilessly, right? These are being captured by the smartphones that they have. So these protests are no longer about one exam. They reflect anger over unemployment, the terrible corruption, the rising education cost, and a belief that the government prioritizes political messaging about Hindutva rather than taking care of the structural reform for the institutions like education and other things. So they see a problem that is systemic that needs to be addressed.
So many analysts say that these protests are significant because many participants come from the urban middle class, which is traditionally considered a strong support base for the BJP. Just how politically important is that shift?
This is absolutely a big shift. As I said, India, especially under Modi, as I called in my book, Modified India, The Transformation of a Nation, which got published by Peter Lang just a few days ago. The whole country has been mobilized in terms of Hindutva in ways that BJP and its mother organization RSS have been able to sell the poison tablets of discrimination and weaponizing religion, the identity. So there are hundreds of millions of Muslims and Christians that are considered to be un-Indian in today's India under Narendra Modi. And the biggest support comes from this middle class, okay? And as I have already mentioned that people like to believe that if you work hard, you study well, you are supposed to move up the ladder. And this is in question right now. So the middle class anger definitely matters. And here is a group, student community that has come from the middle class, and they are right now protesting. And they are finding out that, look, I mean, still, for example, Hindutva matters, and that's how probably those who are affiliated with the institutions and government and all those, they get benefited from all those leaked questions and what have you. So, and they find that, look, we are in a bad shape. So they are very disappointed with the broken promises that Narendra Modi and others have told them over and over again, like we are going to take India to the moon and all those things. So all those false promises are right now making a big, big dent on their very aspiration. So the middle class youths that are protesting at Jantar Mantar, they are dissatisfied, and their dissatisfaction is no longer confined to that, a particular group. So, like, for example, it is the farmers and others, but it is coming from a core group within BJP that really relied upon their support, okay? So this is definitely politically consequential and impossible for the BJP government to dismiss that, look, these are done by, foreign influenced groups and what have you, okay? So this is a big thing in my opinion. So there are definitely a tremendous shift.
So the Modi government says it's addressed the examination controversy and promised reforms, whilst the critics argue the response has relied more on policing than dialogue. How do you assess the government's handling of this movement?
Well, the analysts are right when they say that, yes, it has been a mixed dual-track kind of government response. They are right. Because government is using not only the, like a soft talks, saying that, okay, we are open to talk with the protesters, and they've already allowed the senior ministers like Amit Shah and JP Nadda to open dialogue channels with the student representatives, okay? And Prime Minister also has said that, okay, he's going to allow that the courts to fast track these grievances, okay? And that the culprits who leaked out those questions, they are being tried. But at the same time, they are beating badly through the police and security forces these protesters that have gathered in a very peaceful way, demanding a change, demanding some kind of accountability and reform of the very system. So it's not really that one way that the government is doing it. So it's a dual track record that they have. Okay. What do you call, you give a carrot a little bit, but also at the same time come up with a big hammer, right? So all this tear gas, water cannon use, baton charges, I mean, these are totally unacceptable in a peaceful demonstration. Okay. And this would have, in my opinion, a very long-term kind of impact, because the whole India is watching right now, thanks to smartphones. These are all captured live, and they can see it. And if, for example, the BJP government loses the trust of this middle class that creates the backbone support for the party, then next time they are gone, basically. They won't be able to form a government, in my opinion, okay, if they don't handle it properly.
So we've recently seen youth-led movements influence politics in countries like Bangladesh and Nepal. Do you see any similarities with what's happening in India, or are the political circumstances fundamentally different?
So remember, both Bangladesh and Nepal has gone through a similar kind of revolution, right? That has been able to replace a very autocratic government in Bangladesh that also mocked the students, okay? Not the students alone, but those who were taking a test, for example, to go to the civil service in Bangladesh civil service. And they were called Rajakars because they of a very nasty quota system that allowed about 2% of the applicants to get about more than 50% of the seats in this BCS category, okay, quota. Whereas 98% is relegated to about 45%, and that was totally unfair. And instead of, for example, empathizing with the protesters in Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina and her government called them Razakars, which is considered to be a very derogatory term in the Bangladesh context, okay, because of the 1971 experience. So similar thing happened in India, right? So these people, when they complained, they were called cockroaches, right? So there are those kind of similarities, and that ultimately in Bangladesh and Nepal, that complained also about corruption and all those things, enough is enough. They were able to ultimately topple the regimes in both these countries. But in India, the focus is not about toppling the regime in Narendra Modi's regime, no matter how terrible it is in terms of its record on human rights. They're talking about addressing some issues. They want some reform within the government, with the very institution that the government is responsible for, right? Okay. So there are some differences. And so in India, I don't think they would be ever able to replace the government, because it's not the focus also. But in Bangladesh, it became the focus. In Nepal, it became the focus. But one has to be very careful in terms of how how smartly you handle this social media, because it can be a double-edged sword, right? So first of all, it's social media democratizes the leadership, because it's like a leaderless movement in which whatever one is saying, it is amplified, right? Million times or at least 100,000 times and what have you. So internet, the social media is driving the movement. They are showing it, capturing it, and getting the kind of sympathy, the empathy from the general public. But it can become a problem also in certain way. But that is beyond the scope of this particular discussion. I won't get into it.
With nearly half of India's population under the age of 30, what message do these protests send to political leaders, and how important will Gen Z be in shaping India's political future and upcoming elections?
The clear message that the student community is sending is very simple. They are demanding competence, the transparency, and fairness. Okay. And so they want jobs, obviously, because after all, you go to schools, universities, colleges to earn a degree that would ultimately help you to find a job. And as I said, the jobs are not there. Okay. India has a terrible record with unemployment. Okay. I mean, on a moving average kind of concept, when I was writing my book, Modified India, I found out that on a 30-day moving average, there are about 9% folks that are totally unemployed. And then those who even got the jobs, these are not really secure jobs. And they're underpaid, and forget about those who are unemployed also. So what they want, this Gen Z generation, is they want jobs, they want fairness, they want meritocracy. That means merit-based opportunities, not only to attend schools or graduate schools or what have you, but also the jobs also. And they want reliable institutions that do not somewhat play with their destiny, because they leak out the questions in advance to people that are affiliated with the administration, okay, or those institutions, okay. So they want the government to listen to it. But is Narendra Modi government doing it totally? No. They are half-hearted as I see it, and the whole world is watching. So what I see is these protests are both a warning and an invitation for government to reform. Okay, and if the government does not reform, I can guess that next time BJP will not be in power. Okay, that's how we see it. And that would have a tremendous kind of impact on the election. Already remember, Narendra Modi's government is right now is a coalition government. So if these protests go on for a longer time, it's going to create some kind of fracture within that coalition government. And the coalition parties, they might extract some more concessions. Okay. So that are out there. So the Narendra Modi and his government has to really, tackle this issue in a very smart kind of way, unless they are stupid enough and adamant enough, and they do what they think is brute force, use of brute force. But brute force is not going to work out with this Gen Z movement.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Appreciate your help. Well, that is all for today's edition of Perspectiva. Our thanks go to our guests for sharing their views on the rising Gen Z role in world politics, and for shedding light on the Indian Gen Z protests and the challenges for Modi's government. But please, for more stories and updates, follow us on social media or visit Asian One News TV. Thanks for watching. I'm Philpot, and we'll see you next time.